what's up, everybody? This is your boy, John, and with me is Matt.
Yo, what's up, everybody?
Geeks from the Multiverse podcast. Now, let's start off with episode 20.
Whoop, whoop.
Well, that was terrible, Matt.
Yeah.
You should have done a button or something.
I could do a button.
Hold on. Yeah, woohoo! Got it.
Yeah.
Anyways, so in the podcast world, believe it or not, if you hit 20...
Sorry, I couldn't
on
help
now.
it.
Yeah, okay. Anyways, if you hit 20 episodes, right, you're actually going to consider yourselves as making it as a podcast. So if you go, let's say, less than 20, you tend to fizzle out, right? So the fact that we even got to 20, I mean, granted, we've looked at our views and we've looked, I mean, for a podcast that we are so young, it's pretty impressive in my opinion. And believe it or not, just recently, Matt decided to make a TikTok, which we found very interesting.
I mean, like literally an hour ago. It was kind of like a spur of the moment. Like, hey, I don't think there's as many people as the hashtag that I used, but there are millions of people on TikTok. So we did make it. I did make a TikTok. Like I said, it was probably about like an hour and a half ago.
And the fact that when he told me this, it was surprisingly, so the hashtag that he used, what was it, like geek?
It was hashtag geeked up.
Okay, geeked up. So
yeah.
The fact that this had 87.8 billion,
yeah, it was like 87.3 billion.
Yeah, and I'm like, how? Because like on the planet Earth, there's like maybe a little over like 8 billion people now, and how do you get that many views on a TikTok? Like we using that hashtag, I was surprised by this, but the fact that within, let's say, an hour, what was it? What did we just check? It was like 500 and...
Like 550?
550?
Yeah.
So, guys, literally.
One video.
So...
It's just photos, too. It's not even, like, really that special.
No, so the point is the fact that, he just did that an hour ago, and there's already 500 views, and then...
We have two friends, which is myself and John.
Yeah. So, guys, I mean, we're going to let you know what it is, right? So, it should be Geeks, or it's at Geeks from the Multiverse. Right now, the name of it says Geeks of the Multiverse. Unfortunately, we can't change the name, but hopefully next week we'll make sure that it's still the same or just like has the podcast to it. But again, check it out. It also has our link tree. It has, all the resources you can go to. So again, check our website out. Again, it's geeksfromthemultiverse.com. And, again, look at us on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. I mean, and now you can look at TikTok. I mean, we're going to be trying to, get some more videos out there and try to make it more, relatable to you guys, and, we're trying to be more social media present, right? And so at the end of the day, we're just two geeks, right? We're just trying to make this happen. But anyways, what we're really trying to do in this episode is we're trying to recap all of of our podcast episodes that we just did over the last 20 episodes, really over the last 20 weeks. And so we're trying to figure out like what our, favorite times or, maybe not so great times, all the things that we're gonna, we're gonna be harsh on ourselves, right? We're gonna notice that we, myself and Matt might be different in the way we, view our, favorites, our differences, and all this other stuff. I mean, as you know, one of I guess your guys' favorites is always when Matt and I like to debate, because for some reason we just have this comedic, kind of interaction, and he thinks he wins, and I think I win, and then we don't get anywhere.
I am always right, and John's always wrong.
Okay, we're going to try this again. Yeah. That's not always the case, all right? But it just depends on which way you want to view it, right? But that's why we had you guys, let us know, like, what is, who was right? Because I'll admit that I will be a bigger person, okay? You think that I don't want to be Matt, but I will be. If it comes down to it, then there was a couple times I'm like, you know what, fine. You win. I'm like, who's King Geek of the Week? Or really, King of the Multiverse?
That was me.
Okay, then. See,
but I did win, so...
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Technicality, but... but, right, so we're going to go over our episodes. We're gonna let you guys know what we thought. And, if you have any, questions or maybe other ideas or even just like, maybe your own personal opinions, let us know, right? Because, once we post this, you can let us know what you guys thought about it. But, you know what, Matt? I'm going to let you go. You tell me what one of your favorite episodes was when you started doing this podcast with me.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think going back to, some of the very first episodes that we did, I really enjoyed the video game adaptation series as a whole that we did. Like, I really loved just being able to, chat about those video games that they made movies about, and the TV shows, just that whole series. Like, I think that, to me, like, that was kind of my favorite 3 episodes.
I mean, I'll admit, I think my one of my favorites, or like favorite parts, was the debate we had with the Mortal Kombat. Like, I think that was one of my favorites because he was so determined to tell me that the old ones were this and that, and I was like, I don't know about this, and he was like, "Now I'm going to take a step back. I don't agree with what you're saying," and we kept arguing about this. And honestly, I just was like, fine, you have your own opinions, man, and that's okay, right? Because you're gonna think the Colts are the the Colts. You're gonna think the originals were classic, and I'm not saying they weren't. I agree that the original soundtrack was honestly one of the best of the '90s. And became so iconic, especially in video games. Moving forward. So I can't necessarily disagree with that because I agree that that made it what it was. But I agree that with those episodes, it kind of established like what we were trying to do maybe at first, but then I think we were trying to grow from that, that particular series, and that's why when we did those other series like Marvel and stuff like that, that's why we were trying to kind of branch out a little bit. But I think it was a good like
Yeah.
starting point. Um,
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to focus too much on movies alone,
right.
right out of the get go. But I mean, it's not that we don't want to talk just about movies, but we don't want to just sit on, one particular genre, I guess, of geek culture, like movies or just video games or just comic books. We do want to touch on, you know, everything. But to me, like, that was kind of the best, um, you know, series of episodes. I guess if I had to put my finger on like one individual one, um, it really isn't like any of the geeky ones. I guess the bullying one to me was probably the one that I liked the best.
Well, I can agree because it was more like we both had the passion, right? Because there
Yeah,
was passion behind the ideas, the issues that were going on in our society, especially when we grew up in different eras of generations that our bullying was different in whether it was physical, whether it was verbal, whether it was let's say technology based, like all these other things. And you know when you were growing up, I know that technology, I'm not saying it wasn't there, but it wasn't as prevalent now in the way they do like the cyberbullying and stuff like that, where, I was in that age group where, yes, there was still verbal, there was still physical, but, cyberbullying became kind of it was starting to happen more and more because of social media being prominent, like, Facebook, maybe MySpace, other things that were portraying
yeah,
that at the time.
and I mean, obviously, we didn't necessarily have a lot. I mean, my MySpace maybe was created when I was in high school, maybe, but like we did have like Yahoo Chat
Oh,
and
like AOL
AOL Instant Messenger. So I mean, there were ways, bullying could still happen online, but yeah, bullying mainly took place like in person. But I
right.
think it's just that the evolution of that episode. Yeah, it started more as a conversation, like hey, I'd really love to do something on bullying, and it was really like, okay, well maybe we can just do like a PSA, and it
Right.
was really like a short 20 minutes, like as if we could do something short in 20 minutes.
Yeah, right. That's not
That's
gonna
not
happen.
gonna happen. And I think even recording it, we were thinking maybe 20-30 minutes, which it ended up being like an hour, like over an hour.
Yeah, well, that was the case. Yes.
um but I think like we were planning on it when we sat down to record it, for it to be like an actual episode, because we actually needed it to be an actual episode.
Yeah, and I agree with Matt. I mean, it was something that, if we did it in 20, 30 minutes, we never would have been able to talk about like the main real issues that were regarding, bullying. And I agree with Matt that, having an episode based on that, and especially when we just actually just did a live chat, on Facebook, you know, we were talking about how we're talking about real issues, right? And
Yeah,
and it's important because if you don't, I mean, I'm not saying that most podcasts don't, but I don't like most podcasts that I listen to, they don't really talk about main issues that are involving the main media or like social streaming or anything like that. So they only talk about their like aspects of what they're doing. So like in video games or movies or whatever, like that's what they focus on. They don't focus on like kind of like the bigger issues. And so, when we talked about doing this, I mean, we were talking about like different ideas like bullying, like mental health, addiction, like all these other things that can relate, in some ways, shape, or form. But and hopefully maybe down the road we have more ideas. But we wanted to start out with like building a platform for
Right.
those individuals.
And having, a podcast and being on social media, even creating this TikTok, we want to not just have a platform to talk about video games or talk about, the latest Marvel show. Which if you haven't seen the latest Marvel show, it the first episode is really good.
Oh,
But
you're talking about
anyways,
Secret Invasion, but yeah,
yeah.
I haven't seen it.
We want to use this platform for something other than just talking about geek culture and entertainment and media. We want to, give back to society, give back to the community. And yeah, bullying, we did one episode. And I mean, right now we're planning on, every 10 doing, that more serious, like social issue type episode. But I honestly would like to do one more than every 10th episode. I'd like to, maybe even starting some of our episodes, maybe the first 10, 15 minutes,
Yeah,
talking about stuff and, using this platform for something other than, not that it's nonsense, but at the end of the day, talking about a video game doesn't help anybody other than entertainment.
right. And I mean, I can agree with Matt. I mean, I would like to start doing that more, but I mean, maybe even down the road, who knows? Maybe we, find a way to, you know, maybe even do like little PSAs here and there. Maybe we do like some shorts or something like that, but like have like maybe like mini topics on it. So that way we're still giving you guys some like social issues that are going on, but of course we'll try to do like that, let's say for now the 10 episode, every so often we talk about a new social issue, but maybe give you guys some more like resources or facts or things like that, so that way we can at least say, hey, we're not just focusing on the entertainment, the
Yeah.
the video game or geek culture, right? But it's more giving you a realistic view on what society is now, believing that is the main causes of a lot of the issues. So like I know for a long time, like video games were considered bad because they were, making people violent and, making them, I wouldn't say psychotic, but to the point of like they're going to harm people. And that's not necessarily true, in my opinion, where it's more of an escape. It's more of a virtual world where, unfortunately, yes, there have been, of course, things in the past of like school shootings, and I'm not going to try to go into too deep, but people have said, okay, because of Doom, they had these like violent thoughts in their heads, but that's not necessarily the case.
Well, I mean, it's like, if you're playing GTA, Grand Theft
Yeah,
Auto,
yeah.
right? You know, the one of the biggest games right now, GTA 5, everybody, I mean, most of the people play online. I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, there's millions of people that are playing online. Just because I play GTA online doesn't immediately mean that I'm going to go out there and start a criminal drug enterprise and I'm going to have,
Right.
meth labs and, you know,
No, and I agree with you, Matt. And I think the biggest thing, and maybe this is another idea too, is talking about morality in children. When it comes down to the parent side of the things, like teaching their children what is right from wrong. And realizing that.
you mean when I am playing GTA and that person that kills me and then I hear the voice and it's like, how are you, like 5
Or 12 or
12? Like how and it's like this really high pitch, like, I just killed you. Like,
no.
you shouldn't be playing this game, kid.
No, I know, but that's the problem is like, unfortunately, parents will buy games and they don't really teach their kids on what is, reality.
Age appropriate.
Right, and I think that's kind of like the biggest issue is like, and I hate saying it because I'm going to be a parent soon, and Matt's already a dad of 2, but you know I would love to teach my kid like, hey, guess what? This is what you're doing in GTA is not right. Like this is not what real life happens. Like you do not kill cops. You do not make meth labs. You do not make unfortunately prostitutes like do things like no. It's the wrong message. Like being like, listen, this is not a real life scenario. I said, this is what you should not be doing. You can, play these games, but understand the morality behind the games you're playing. And that, I believe, is the biggest cause to why you have these younger generations, maybe get this idea of like, okay, this is cool, but
Well, it's like a desensitization. Like you have somebody who's 12 or 10 or in that like age range, and they're playing a game like GTA where yeah, you can go actually into a strip club and get a lap dance.
right.
Like this is like one of those parts of the games like they may not talk about in the ad, but it's in the game, and you have a 12-year-old kid that can do this. Not to mention you can make any like pretty much all types of drugs, sell them,
Right. And it makes it more realistic. And
but it desensitizes them to this type of thing where like you can walk around and basically punch whoever you want, shoot whoever you want. You can walk up to them, steal their car. Like it desensitizes that type of behavior. So I can see where that would be serious, like in the real world type of sense. And that's where, yeah, morality in video games, but a 12-year-old doesn't need to be playing GTA.
right.
There are other games that would be more suitable.
Right. What I'm saying though is like, unfortunately, with our generations, right? I mean, I'm assuming your parents probably didn't care really what you were playing at the time, give or take. I mean, my guess is that, but like, I know my dad when I was growing up, like, he would even attest.
I mean, I don't think there were a whole lot of games that were like GTA though.
No, I mean, because like you think of like Super Mario Brothers, you think of like those were intended for kids, maybe like teenagers and stuff. But like there, I would say more like I would say Doom later on in life, and with the consoles coming out. But now with graphics and everything else, like with especially for example Mortal Kombat, like it was a very bloody, gory game.
I mean, you're talking graphic. I think maybe the most edgy would have been like Duke Nukem, maybe.
Well, no, no, I know, but like the fact that you play games now it gets scary. Like it's to the point where you can see all the blood, you can see all the gore, you can see all these things that you're right because now it's more desensitized because that is what we've been used to playing. Whether you're unfortunately I hate saying it, but if like you're a 5-year-old and you see your dad playing it, and then like you start playing it, and then you're like, oh wow, this is like
well, and that's like I think the difference too is like in previous GTA's, like you could pick up the hooker and you would do it in the car, but you wouldn't see it. And the
Right.
thing with like GTA 5, you can walk into that strip club, you can get the lap dance. There's no censorship, there's no blurring, there's no nothing. Like you can see full, full top.
Well, and unfortunately, like even though you have the ratings of like E, T, and then M, right? It doesn't matter, unfortunately. I mean, if you have an adult that buys the game and then the kid goes home and starts playing it, I mean, it's really, in my opinion, it is really the parent's job to look at this
Yeah.
and be like, okay, is this suitable for my kid at let's say 12 years
And that
old?
would be, definitely, an episode idea talking about like video game morality and making sure, you know, if you're buying a video game for somebody, who's younger,
Right.
make sure that it is age appropriate and make sure like what's going on in that game before you give it to that person.
And I agree. And I know
I've certainly played my fair share of games where I get into it and about maybe 5-10 minutes into it, I go, you need to leave the room.
like no, I agree. There are definitely some games and unfortunately movies and TV shows that I agree that you definitely don't want to be
Like The
playing.
Boys.
Yes, don't watch that with your kids.
I don't think you want to watch that with anybody else in the room.
Besides yourself. But anyways, so Matt, I know we kind of went on a tangent, but I would say I agree with you with a lot of those episodes, but I also want to say two that were definitely one of my favorites. But I'm going to start off with this. So I understand that our first episode was a little bit rough at first because we were just getting used to the fact of, recording. We're
I
trying
mean,
to
it was episode 1.
I mean, true, but the
You know?
reason why I liked it is because we got a chance to really see what it was like, and also just kind of define like the podcast itself. I mean, defining what a geek was, defining what nerds and dweebs and going into that realm, and then
Yeah.
even the multiverse, and then like talking about like the Mandela effect. Like it was a cool idea, and I mean, and
We'll
ironically,
have to rehash that.
Yeah, we will.
episode.
We will. And I think that, it's ironic both Matt and I will look at the analytics of things, and we'll look at and see like what our like top 10 are. And believe it or not, our first episode is the most popular episode, which I was very surprised because
Yeah.
it wasn't, in our opinion, like the best out of them all. It was because we again, we were trying to establish the podcast. We were trying to like get the ideas going, the topics, and it was fun. Don't get me wrong. I mean, actually, I would say it was a little side one, but like even doing our trailer, it was the funniest thing
Oh,
because
the trailer was awesome. Yeah.
and it was actually in my apartment, and we were sitting there and we're like, man, how do we want to do this? We spent 2 or 3 hours trying to figure out what is the best way. I mean,
And
yeah,
then the ending of it was complete improv.
it was yeah. And so Matt thought it was funny to be like, you know what? I'm just
Like,
gonna
do
go.
you have a bag of chips?
And I was like, I do actually. Here's a bag. And so he grabs it and he's like, he's like, okay, bye. And I'm like, hey, well, what are you doing? And he's like, okay, I mean, I'm done. See ya, and we're just sitting there, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, okay, I guess, do you not want to record? He's like, no, you can, bye. He like walks away, and I'm like, all right, till next time, and we did our thing, and I sat there and I was like, at first I thought it was kind of weird, but then like after a little bit, I was like, you know what, this is a different idea. Now, granted, I'll admit, it did sound scripted, okay, because it unfortunately was. It was our first time really. That was probably our first time ever recording anything. Like, it
Yeah.
was the first time we were ever doing this, but it was honestly one of the funnest ones, even though it took so long. And it was only a minute and 30 seconds, I think, or a little shorter
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah. It was pretty short.
And but it made us realize that yes, we needed to work on more of the less scripted, the more, kind of fundamentals of like podcasting itself. Because, I know Matt did some research on, some of the things that we've been doing now, but like, at that time we were so new to this that we had no idea that what would work and what wouldn't work, right? And so, getting back to that first episode though, I think it just really defined like who we were as two individuals, and I think it really made us realize that this is why, we wanted to do this podcast. And I mean, granted, we'll get into our little bio, but I mean, when he came up to me and talked about the podcast, I was like, why are we like, what is the name? And he's like, oh, Geeks from the Multiverse. And I'm like, okay. I was a little confused at first, but then I was like, you know what? It took me a bit. It took me a bit to get behind the idea, but then I was like, you know what? This is perfect. I think this is who we are as individuals. But I think with that episode, it really kind of defined the the motive behind of why we were trying to do this.
I was kind of relieved already because I had already created a logo at that point.
I mean, that's
So,
true. He was like, I really hope this idea is going to stick because I have no idea. But I would say my other favorite, to be honest, I mean, and of course I've talked about it with Matt multiple times. I would say the Marvel series. Like if we're talking about series, the reason why I say that is because both him and I, we could have talked for hours about all of the different phases, all the different movies, and the key points of it. But I highly doubt you wanted to listen to us for like 2 or 3 hours talking about one phase at a time.
you're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, whatever. But anyways, so it was an interesting idea, and I was like, I'm so glad that we did it. And I mean, of course, we're not going to not talk about Marvel ever again, but it was an idea that we had because we both knew that this is why, one of our main topics that we've always liked talking about was Marvel, and that's how we connected as friends and everything else. And I mean, Matt and I have actually gone to movies together with like we've seen what was it, Endgame? It was Infinity War. I think it was a couple other movies we saw together at the time, with actually at the time with his wife and at the time my girlfriend, which is now my wife. But it was interesting because that was a passion that we both like talking about, and we tried to like, you know, talk to the main key points. And I mean, there was so many key things that we were talking about that it was so hard to not shorten that. And so when we talked about it, it was honestly one of our favorite things to do. And so that's why I think with that episode, it really kind of, pushed that motive of like, yes, we're passionate about this, but we can talk about, other topics besides just Marvel. We don't have to be like another Marvel cinematic, podcast or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would say probably, to kind of shorten this up a little bit, I would say my worst one, or I would say not worst, I should say like my least favorite one probably would be um like I talked to Matt before this, but it was the Terminator like Matrix. Not saying that I didn't mind listening to the fan theory and stuff. It was just it was for me at first because I haven't seen those movies in a while to get behind the fan theory at first, and it was hard for me to like grasp it because there was so much to talk about in such a short time. And I understand that Matt's going to have his comment here in a second, but it was hard for me to at first grasp the idea about how the Terminator and the Matrix were connected. And listening, I was like, okay, it almost took me like half the episode to be like, okay, you know what? Now I finally get the idea of why they're somehow connected. But at first, when you're hearing it, yeah, you would have been totally oblivious if you've never seen any of that. You never would have understood what half of what Matt was saying at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, honestly, I like the episode, not because I did the research into it, but
All right, yeah, good to
um,
throw that in there, huh?
but I also love the Matrix and I love the Terminator, franchises, so I do know a lot about them in general. So when I saw, the fan theory, I was like, yeah, this needs to be an episode and needs to be talked about because it's a pretty awesome theory. Um, but it is one of those things like if you don't know a lot about Terminator or the Matrix, you're really probably not going to get a lot out of that fan theory. And it's probably like if we did if John all of a sudden did a fan theory episode where he talked about, how Harry Potter's connected to the X-Men, like
I mean, yeah.
it would be completely outrageous and wouldn't make sense. But to me, I would hear crickets. It would be like Charlie Brown hearing the adults like wah 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 wah.
Yeah,
Like
no, no, that's true. That's true.
it's pull another Simpsons reference. Who the hell cares? Like Family Guy. I'm sorry,
Family Guy.
a Family Guy reference. Who the hell cares? Like to me, I don't care about that.
But okay,
So I can see where you're coming from.
but keep in mind that I'm not saying that who the hell cares in that sense. But it was more like
But no, but
I was still respecting your opinions
if
on
you
this
if
though.
I'm just saying in general, like if you don't know a lot about the franchise, the fan theory doesn't. It's not going to make sense until you hear all the information, which is where you had to hear the information and connect the dots before you could see the picture.
Right, and I mean, like I
And
said,
then once you saw the picture, then you were like, "Oh, yeah, that makes
well,
sense."
no, and like I said, I agree with that. But it was the reason why I'm saying this is because it was hard at first to listen and to kind of get in more involved. But I agree. But I guess really what I'm trying to say is like I still respected what you were saying. I'm not saying I didn't care about the series because I did watch it. I'm not saying that I didn't watch any of the Matrix or the Terminators, but because you're right, I haven't watched it in so long. To try to get those ideas into play was hard to like process everything, get in the
Yeah.
overall picture of it. So that's why at first it was tough, but then like I said, it became something, and I was like, oh, okay, now this makes more sense in the long run. But
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I think because I do love both series and doing the research and everything, but I mean, I do enjoy both series and I know a lot about it. So, instantly just reading the fan theory, I was like, "Oh, that's really cool," because I do know a lot about it. I didn't have to really do all the research necessary that I did for the episode to completely understand it. You know
yeah,
what I mean? So the research that I did was just for the episode, but I mean, I can get where you're coming from, and like from a general standpoint, like if you don't know a lot, you're not going to get a lot out of it. Um, it it's not one of my top 10, but it's not my least favorite either.
no, and like I said, I mean, like what your opinions and my opinions are going to be different in like what our favorites are, what our least favorite is, And but actually, real quick, what is your least like? I would say favorite episode, or what's one that you were like, yeah, I really could have not done it if that was the case.
I don't really know right now. I mean, there are a lot that I do like. I mean, there's not really one that I can say I don't like. Um, because I mean, most of the ones that we've done up until this point, I mean, we did the video game series, video game adaptation series. We went from that into the Marvel series.
I mean, and I know we did like Destroy All Humans and Far Cry, and we're trying to still get some more video games out there. But You know,
Yeah, I mean, we did Destroy All Humans, and I think if I had to pick one, it probably would have been that Destroy All Humans.
yeah, I mean, because I unfortunately like playing the first game, like it was okay, but I think really the main like gist of it is like the second one was so much better, and even the spin-offs. I never played any of the spin-offs, but the second one was so iconic for that series that
Yeah.
a lot more people probably know about that than they would the first one. And I agree. Like I don't think making a whole series out of it would have been like, okay, guys, let's talk about this, and we dive right
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
But it was hard to like get behind the idea of the first one because it was, it was cool to a sense, but it was so minimal in what they were doing at that time. Because the
Yeah,
second
I
one
mean,
had more.
it is still a cool episode. It's kind of that nostalgic episode where if you haven't ever played the game, but you've seen it, you know, we talk about quite a few things, and we do add a little bit of humor into it
Oh yeah,
because it is a
no,
pretty
yeah,
humorous game. So,
no, and I agree. Yeah, because a lot of the games we
it's
played.
just not. I mean, for me, it's not one of my personal favorite episodes, but I mean,
No, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, because there's only so much you can talk about, and when we added that humor to it, like it at least made it like kind of like break the ice a little bit, kind of get
yeah,
more into it.
yeah.
Um, but Matt, I feel that our viewers really don't know who we are.
And I thought about that, and this is part of what we like. What do we do for a 20th episode? And I was like, well, we really haven't given our bios, and we probably should have done it like maybe episode 1 or 2, maybe not one, but like maybe like episode 2 or 3.
Yeah, right. Or like in the at least first few episodes, I would have thought. Yeah,
Probably not episode 20,
but
but like, I mean, we're in episode 20. Here we are. We're recording right now.
I mean, so I'm gonna say this, man. I think the reason why too is that I think we wanted to see how far this was gonna go before we really wanted to introduce ourselves.
Well, and I think just for putting out the podcast and getting content out there, I think that was what we were kind of more focused on, not really doing like, you know, who am I? Who are you? Like,
Why do we do this?
we're just two guys doing this, but here we are in episode 20. And I think we just kind of wanted to, I mean, not too deep down, but I think just kind of touch on certain points and
Yeah, kind of get an idea of who we are and why do we do this? For our own pleasure, or is it like I said to get fame and fortune? I have already said that that's not the goal, but we'll go into that. But go ahead, Matt. Explain who Matt Gunther is to the people.
so, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I put in here, like for a bio, was like, just certain, I guess, like kind of stats about me.
Wait, are you like
Um,
talking about a baseball card now?
Sure.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. And then there were a couple questions in this that I asked, which was what makes you a geek and why a podcast? And I figured after like I'm done doing the bio part for me, you can do yours, and then together we can kind of answer that like why a podcast, because I think that's more of a us question than just a me question.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was born in '79.
Oh, he's old. I'm just kidding, guys. He's
Uh,
young at heart.
So even though, I say this all the time, even though I was born in '79, I don't consider myself an '80s kid, if that makes sense. Like,
I mean, you were on the edge of the decade.
I,
You know what I mean?
I don't know, like being, obviously 1 through 10 through the '80s. I don't know like a lot about the music. I don't know a lot about that era because I was so young. Um, what I would consider myself is a '90s kid because being 10 and 11, growing up, going to high school in the '90s, like the music, you know, just being in that time period, like for me, like the music was the best in the '90s.
And
Sorry, John, but
no,
the
no, no.
'90s
Whoa, whoa,
music
whoa.
was the best.
Listen, I mean, granted, I was born in the '90s, and granted, I was by the end of the millennia, I was 7, right? So, granted, sure, you're right. Maybe, but like for me, like growing up, like of course, you listen to like your parents' music and stuff like that. So I agree that certain eras were different in their own way, right? And
Yeah.
so I can agree that yes, some of the some of the best music I would say is some of the 90s because of course as I got older I had to, kind of do my own research and go back. But yeah, and I did that, but
Yeah. But
anyways.
I the music in the '90s were some of the best. I would have to say, some of the cartoons in the '90s were some of the best.
I agree.
Although I do have to say, a lot of the cartoons from the '80s, arguably, were the best. Like Voltron, GI Joe, He Man, like
Transformers.
Transformers. Like those were the ones that I grew up on as a kid. So those are very much like my wheelhouse right there. If that tells you anything, right? Like
He's like, I'm not telling
right
you how
there.
old I am, but
I've been married for 20 years, 20 plus years. In August, it'll be 21 actually.
whoop whoop.
So I do have 2 kids, even though they're not really kids anymore. One just got married a couple weeks ago
Yeah.
in Arizona. Other things, I've worked in human services for about 20 years.
If that tells you anything.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So I've worked with developmentally disabled adults. I've worked in the addiction field as a recovery coach and a substance abuse counselor. I'm a Christian. Have been a Christian for about 20 years too.
Sounds like there's a 20-year theme here.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So even though I do have a faith in God and I've attend church faithfully, it doesn't mean that I'm going to start preaching it here.
No, and I agree with you because like our beliefs are not going to be controlled by this podcast because like we talk about those topics and we don't try to do anything that is not out of the scope or the norm of what we're doing.
I think it just keeps us morally in tune, not being, overly explicit.
I love how he looks at me when he does this.
I look at you, John.
Look, I try. Okay, I am trying to get better. I'm sorry. The man above. I'm sorry. Like it happens. And
But I use my faith in trying to keep the moral ground and trying to be the best that I can be as a person and a human being. But a lot of the skills that I bring to the podcast, maybe not speaking, because I'm obviously not the best speaker in the world, but like my ability to, edit audio, setting all this stuff up, working with the equipment, graphic design. So a lot of the, the stuff on YouTube that we have, the videos, the graphic pieces that we have, the logo, I've been the one putting all that together. And the only thing that I can say is I've learned those skills because of church, because of the people in church taught me those skills. And I'm thankful for those people.
Yeah, and that's something that you can't, like knowledge is power, man. Like, you can't get rid of that. That's plain and simple.
And so, that's why I mentioned that, I am a Christian, but I've learned a lot of those skills from going to church. And, I kind of leave it there. If you want to ask me about it, send me a message. I would be glad to talk to you about it, but I'll leave it there. So what makes me a geek? Well, there's a few things. If by 20 episodes you couldn't have figured it out, I will tell you.
That's true. I mean, if you couldn't have figured it out by now, then I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, just listen to the Matrix Terminator fan theory episode and you'll probably figure it out.
Oh, trust me. It's a doozy.
I love action figures.
Oh, yes, he does.
So
do not call them dolls, okay?
I use the word collecting, but I do love collecting them. And I use the word collecting loosely because I'm the type of person where I don't want to just collect an action figure to have it be stored in a box.
Yeah, I mean, but it depends on what you're collecting, though, right? I mean, because if it's like
it does depend. I mean, I do have Christine, which is the Stephen King car. That one's still in the box.
Of course, that's valuable to you.
But for me, action figures, like I want to be able to touch it, hold it, pose it. Like I want to be able to manipulate it.
Sounds like you want to become an animator. It sounds like that's what your secondary job should be then.
Maybe
one day.
But with action figures, like I want to be able to hold it because I kind of look at it in this way. Like if I have a bunch of these action figures sitting in boxes, sitting in shelves in my house, in about 40 years when I die, Sure, they might be worth thousands, maybe 50, 60, who knows? But when I die,
Yeah.
they're still going to be sitting on this shelf in the boxes. And you know what my kids are going to do? They're going to take them off the shelf and they're going to sell them.
Or what you do is you give it to your good friend John, and then he'll keep them around for a little while, and then I'll try to donate it to something else.
You're going to sell them too.
I'm not gonna sell them. I would keep if I needed to keep them. I would keep them for you.
But that's the thing. Like, I don't want that to be like the legacy of what I'm getting.
Oh, so you don't want to be known as the collectible?
So I like to hold them. I like to be able to see them. I like to be able to, some of the more expensive ones that you can like change the heads and the hands and they have different accessories. I like to do that.
It sounds like you need to buy two. Like have one you can play with, and then have one you could store somewhere else.
I don't have that type of money, John.
Oh, I'm just saying if that's what you like to do. But anyways,
but I don't. I'm not really looking so much at the financial value in them, more of the sentimental. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. Like I like the sentimental value of them. I've always enjoyed video games. That's not really surprising, I think, at this point.
That's definitely not surprising, but yeah.
Even from like a very early age, like for me, like I think we kind of touched on it a little bit, but
yeah, what was it, the Nintendo?
I did play the Nintendo, John, actually.
I know. I was saying, what was your first console though that you played?
The Nintendo.
Okay, then that's what I just said.
So for me, like growing up, like the bullying episode, I know for both of us it was very personal because I definitely was bullied as a kid. So, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of, depressing times. But I knew, playing, just a video game, even for an hour, like it was that time where I didn't have to focus on the world around me. Right. I could completely zone out and zone into the world that I was playing.
Right. You had your own escape. You had your own way to just decompress. Yeah.
So it occupied my time, even though, maybe now, outwardly, if you see me playing a game, it may not look like I'm relaxed. It may not sound like I'm relaxed.
No, because a lot of times you're very focused. That's what I've noticed.
But what I am is I'm completely engaged. I'm completely zoned in. And even today when I'm playing a game, like it's a time for me, like I'm trying to forget like the day. I'm trying to not just, escape for 10, 12 hours, but it might be like, a couple hours.
Well, let's just talk about the days that when you and I used to play for hours on end.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll get there.
Okay.
But like, it was just, just a time for like an hour or two. Like I could just de-stress, forget about like whatever happened at work, especially like, working in the addiction field. Instantly, like you deal with a lot of trauma, you deal with a lot of stories that you don't want to hear, and you can't just go home and then forget about it like that.
Wow, that was a pretty good snap. Sorry, go ahead.
So video games to me was one of those avenues where like I could just turn it on, I could forget about what was going on, and then once I turned it off, like it was gone. Like I didn't, I could move on with the rest of the night and not have to focus on anything else.
No, yeah, absolutely.
So what John was getting at earlier, I actually met him working at a residential treatment facility. We were both working third shift.
Oh yeah, fun times.
He was actually working there when I started there, but I think I could probably say this, like probably from the very first shift that I worked, we pretty much became like instant friends.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, granted, it took a little bit to, I would say convince him. Like I was like, I'm a genuine guy, but then he was like,
well, I mean, when you would walk in, when you would walk me into the walk-in and be like, hey, we could just take food in here.
I mean, okay, really, we're gonna go that route. Okay, well, listen, okay, there was a time, yes, that we both would, occasionally, if like, the leftovers, right? A lot of times they throw them away, so they'd keep them for now, and then they might give it to like patients or whatever. So we're like, hey, why don't you just go in the back? We take some food, we're all good, but not a big deal. And that's what him and I used to do from like time to time.
Anyways, but yeah, I mean, when we would get home, maybe 9 o'clock.
Oh yeah, it was like pretty like instant.
We would get on like, and he talked me into getting a PS4,
I did actually.
and we would get, we would both sign on, and we would play probably until at least like
It was like 2 or 3. Yeah,
noon.
no, it was like 2 or 3, depending on the day.
We would play for a ridiculously long time.
I'm pretty sure your wife actually wanted to kill me at one point.
Yeah, she would be like, "Are you going to bed anytime soon?"
No.
No.
We're gonna keep playing.
So I do, even though I do like playing some first-person shooters, they're not my favorite. They're not my favorite, but I do more like Borderlands, Far Cry type games. Call of Duty is not my favorite.
Oh, that's a whole nother ball game.
That's a whole nother type of thing. But I do like sports games. Like I'm not so much into like hockey or basketball.
Yeah, I was gonna say NBA. Yeah, sure.
But Madden is kind of my game. More so into role-playing games that like Elden Ring, Elder Scrolls, like those types. If I had to play multiplayer, co-op is where it's at for me.
Well, and then the problem is like we've talked about before. Like, there's not too many, so it's kind of hard to play that multi.
And like I said before in the live stream, I can't stand horror games. For whatever reason, I just can't play them.
That's
I
why
love the horror genre. I can watch any horror movie, no matter how gory or disgusting it is. I can watch it, but you put on a horror game, I just can't. I can't do it.
What? So you wouldn't play Resident Evil Biohazard?
No,
Why not? I heard that
No.
virtual reality was a fun time.
no.
Why not? That's what I've been told. I never played it, but
No.
oh, okay, sorry.
So some other things that some other geeky things. I have been known to enjoy and play D&D, which is Dungeons and Dragons.
Which we're gonna be doing an episode in the future.
Yes.
So yes.
Playing music, so I do play bass guitar. I've been teaching myself drums. I know a little bit about playing guitar. I know very little about playing keyboard. You know,
You know,
I do love 80s and 90s cartoons. I obviously I could go on forever, but I'm not.
thank you.
So, John,
All right. So, let's see. Let's start off with this. So, I am currently married to my wife. We got married in November. Um, I have a dog named Bucky who is occasionally has been on this episode, but we've been talking about him a little bit. But he's a corgi, so
really short legs.
really short legs. Yes, and we talked about him, I believe, in the alien episode, like having the short legs of like the dog was a an alien. But yeah, and actually, yes, I'm expecting. Sorry, I'm not expecting. My wife is expecting in September, so we're gonna have our first child. It's gonna be a boy, and my dad's very proud of that. That's for sure. And let's see. So, what are some things about me? Well, I can say that I would say what really kind of defines me as a geek is really Marvel. I think that was my first like true like passion, right? Because unfortunately, like growing up, no, I didn't read any of the comics as much. I had to do my own research. I had to, kind of get more involved. I know over the years some people have gotten me like, like little comic books and things like that. But if I could have had a chance to read the comic books back in like the 60s, the 70s, like the golden era, like that would have been great. I would have loved to read some of those original, like first edition, like Captain America's or Thor or Hulk or like that would have been great. I would have loved to read all that. But I know nowadays, yeah, good luck trying to find them and good luck trying to even see if you can even take them out of the book without decreasing the value. But I would say, growing up, yes, like I was telling you, Matt, I mean, yeah, I grew up in the 90s, I was born in the 90s, kind of had that a little bit, but then really 2000s was the era of where I kind of grew up in, so, I do remember certain cartoons. I do remember, certain, TV shows that were not how they are today, right? Because a lot of the TV shows, even in the, believe it or not, early 2000s were not as bad as you think because they were still kind of funny to the point where they weren't really as regulated as they are now. Like they still had that like you had some censorship like little things, but it wasn't like what they are now where they're like really boring and stupid and I don't understand what they're talking about half the time. Like growing up, my dad and I, we would watch, he would be like, "Hey, let's watch the Three Stooges, man." So we'd be, have our bowl of like Moose Tracks, right? So we'd have that. So we usually watch it on like a Saturday morning or something like that. Um, so we'd watch like old classics like that. We'd watch like, um, some of the actually here's an '80s show that I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Um, I know the theme song or a little bit. It's "Believe It or Not, I'm Walking on Air." It's The Greatest Married Hero. Yes, sorry. So like it was weird, but like him and I would watch it, and like stuff like that. So it was that weird like you know growing up like listening to like certain music or even certain TV shows. Like it was nice to get that cultural background, right? So like we talked about in the music episode, we had all those like different genres, so yes, growing up, my dad would listen to, like I said, rock. He'd listen to rap. He'd listen to all kinds of different things. So he taught me a lot of the '90s and the '80s and things of that nature. And then after a while, I'm not gonna lie, my whole family was country. Okay, yes, and it was bad. And I'm saying this.
Oh,
Listen, man. Now imagine you playing this every day. Okay, I'm talking every day to the point that it would drive me so insane.
I'm out.
Exactly. I wanted to jump out of the car. Like I really wanted to do a duck and roll and just like start walking anywhere because it was to the point where it was so bad. But finally, of course my friends were like, "Hey, listen to this." And so yeah, okay, I'll admit it. People were like, "Oh, I know I'm not going to say the term, but a white gangster, right?" They were like, "Oh, look at you, you're like lacking rap and trying to be like a wannabe with this and that." And I'm like, it's not that I was trying to, it was more like that was the style that I liked. Right. So growing up, I was the
J Life.
J Life. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So yes, a little fun
J
fact.
Life comes out
All
in
right.
episode 20.
No. Okay. Okay. So what happened was my buddies and I, we were, at the time, we we all decided, we were like, man, we really want to be rappers, right? So this was in high school, and so I didn't. Yes, I created the name, like, but I had a different meaning for the name. So really, what it was is it was the meaning behind it was John's life. Okay, it sounds really stupid, but meaningful to me because it was like a story about me. It wasn't. It was very simple. It wasn't like stupid as in like little doozy or like these little whatevers, right? So it's like I made it because like
Little peep.
little peep, little dark, little twist, a little this, like I don't care. Like to me, it was more like I wanted to create my own story and using music in that sense. And my buddies, I had I still have a good friend Jordan, which I know you know.
Yep.
He wanted to be a DJ, and so the man had like 3-4 different names. I can remember a couple. Okay, so he liked using German Prince. Okay, that was his go-to. It sounds weird, right? So he had like all these different variations of his name, and I'm like, dude, you need to pick a name, or you're gonna lose people on. Like you can't have 3 different names. Like you need to pick one and stick with it. It's like DJ Jazzy Jeff and like the Prince. Like it's simple. Pick one. You know what I mean? And so we had a couple others. One was I can't remember his exact name, but his rapper name was Tension. Okay. Now I'm just telling you because these were the different names, and we had another one. Um, his name was Kid Fresh because his dad, I guess back in the day, was a rapper, and his name was Fresh, so he decided to be Kid Fresh. And there was this other guy. I can't remember off the top of my head what he did. I I can't. I really can't. But anyways, we had a group of us. I even suggested the name. Like we were gonna have like a rap group, and the name that I can make that
Oh,
I
I
came.
can't wait to hear it.
Okay, hold on, ready? So the name that I came up with was called the Future Dream. Okay, it wasn't bad, right? It was just a name, and they were like, yeah, let's do it. But the problem was, right? Like what we're doing right now, like recording and having our equipment, we didn't have all this, right? Because we're high school kids. We don't have money, right? So we had these grand ideas. Nothing came about it. And so my buddy, Kid Fresh, he was trying to come up with some songs, and basically he had his own version of one song, and he wanted me to feature on this song, but it was a cover. And so there have been people that have been trying to find this particular one on YouTube. Good luck trying to find it because I don't even know where it's at, and I don't have the original recording because he does. I don't. And so there is something out there, and it's stupid, man. Like I'm telling you, it is stupid. I don't know why I did it, but I did. But anyways, enough about J Life. That is my past life. That is not who I am now, right? I'm just John, right? I'm just Geeks from the Multiverse. But anyways, so growing up, my dad and I, like what the biggest thing, the biggest lesson I would say, like when we were talking about morality in video games, right? So talking about what's real, what's not, right? So I remember one conversation I had with him was, if we're playing GTA, right? Some of the original GTA's like San Andreas, Vice City, all that. First of all, he like looks at me and he says, "All right, I want you to listen very closely, okay? So what you're doing in this game right now, okay? It's not real, okay? So if you're killing a cop, that ain't real, okay? You understand me? Okay. Now, anything else in this game, like if you're, killing a prostitute or killing those people, that's not real, okay? I want you to understand this now, okay? Now, granted, I love my dad, but he would go on for a couple hours. And he would go on for hours. Okay, I love him to death, but my God, this man would do speeches like it was no tomorrow. It's like listening to Abraham Lincoln's like 7 years ago. Like it was that bad sometimes. I love you, Dad, but it was to the point where I was like, if you don't shut up, I love you to death, but oh my God, I got the point. So I love him, but it's like I'm glad that we've gotten older now. Like he'll do the shortened version. Do you understand? Great. And it's nothing more than that. But anyways, like when you were talking about like growing up with, like how you would kind of escape, right? So my brother, I always bring up my brother, okay? And the reason why I say this is because a lot of times I love him to death, but what he would do, right? So every Christmas, okay, we'd get like a new video game. First thing he does is he's like, "Oh, that's cool." He grabs it, brings it to the console, and he starts playing it. And I'm like, "That's my game." He's like, "Oh, I know." And he starts playing it. And I'm like, "No, man, like that's not your game." And he's like, "No, it's our game." I'm like, "Who said it was your game?" But the funny thing about that was like as we got older, I would go to like GameStop, and when I turned 17, I was like, "Okay, great." So like the first Red Dead Redemption, okay, that came out, I was 17 at that time. And I was like, "Great, I'm going to go. I don't need mom. I don't need anybody. I can do this." So I grabbed it. And then, of course, Michael's like, "Hey, do you mind grabbing a game for me?" Like legit. And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, I've been waiting to get this game, but I'm not old enough. And I don't, I can't go with mom. It looks weird. He's 15 at this time." And I'm like, "Okay, fine. What is it?" He's like, uh, I honestly can't remember the game, but it was just like something stupid. And I'm like, "So you're gonna use me from now? Like I'm your source?" He's like, "Yeah, come on now, hook a brother up." And I'm like, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But anyways, you know, what makes me a geek, I would say, is I like playing video games. I like you know watching Marvel. I always like to. I'm trying to get more involved in like other things. So like I said, when I've been watching Star Trek, right? I never watched it, right? So I'm watching it now. I'm watching the original series. I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm also trying to, learn about other, let's say, genres of like, the geek culture, right? So like and this about me, okay? I hate, and I'm gonna repeat myself. I hate like anything horror or anything like anything else. My dad and I could tell you one quick story is and there's a reason why I don't like Beetlejuice. Okay. So my dad and I and my brother, okay, we're all sitting there, we're watching Beetlejuice. And granted, I'm a kid at this time, and he's like, "Okay, we're gonna order some pizza." I'm like, "Great." So all of a sudden, he's like, "Okay, I ordered the pizza," and I'm like, "Cool." I'm still watching like Beetlejuice, and it's like this, that like the parents when they get like the dad gets this weird long elated face and all this stuff. It's like that scene,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden I bite into the pizza and I'm like, "What in the heck is Dad? What did you get?" And he's like, "Oh, I got mushrooms." And I'm like, "Oh." I'm like, "Oh, this is disgusting." I'm like, "It's slimy, it's gross." And he's like, "Oh, I guess you're not going to eat that." And I said, "You're right. I'm not going to eat this." And I was like, "I'm done. I'm going to bed." I was like, I didn't like the movie. I hated that pizza. And I was like, from that day on, I was like, I don't like Beetlejuice. And I definitely didn't like mushrooms at that time. And there was just over the years, like all these different things like Chucky. The one thing that I know that I don't like because you were like, "Hey, let's watch Chucky" when both him and I were like, doing third shift together. He's like, "Oh, let's watch Chucky," and I'm sitting there like, "Okay, this is nighttime. Here's Chucky on the screen." I'm like, I really don't want this guy to come through the door and like try to kill me now. But I would say that the other big thing that Matt didn't want to talk about is actually he got me into going to church. So he was the one that got me into going to church at the time. And so the biggest thing was the way he got me. This is the way he got me. He's like, "Hey, man." He was like, "Hey," he's like, "So we're going to church on Sunday, and they're gonna be they're gonna be doing raffles for the Celtics tickets." And I'm like, "Sure, man, let's do it." I walk in. Now, granted, no, as a kid, we never really went to church at all. It was mostly like, our parents were always busy, or we had stuff going on. We had sports going on. So I'm a big sports guy. I love playing football, baseball, basketball. Never got into hockey, or soccer, but never would I probably play hockey, but I dabble in soccer. But anyways, so he got me into the. Oh, okay, we're good now.
Yeah.
So he got me into going to church, and then all of a sudden, I was like, what is this? And I started going, and the pastor, the lead pastor, was like, hey, you know, you should really, come back and like, kind of help out. He's like, yeah, maybe, whatever. And so the biggest thing is all of a sudden I got these text messages from the lead pastor of the church that he was going to like every day. It was to the point where I'm like, can you stop talking to me? This is getting a little close and personal. Like, I need you to stop like texting me. But he would keep doing it. And then I'm like, I need you to like I ended the text, and I'm like, I can't do this ever again. And so when Matt and I later on we were hanging out, he was like, hey, I had a buddy named Rory who's doing a church. And I was like, oh, okay. So we, went to the, church with him, and I started going. And so I started going there for since 2018. And, I had my wife come with me one time, and she got hooked, and she was going ever since. So it was kind of nice to like do that together and not really just doing it by myself. Um, but I think overall, when it comes down to, who I am, I used to always say I'm just this tall white dude who's goofy looking, didn't really understood like life itself, but I was always willing to, as my parents like to call it, learn the hard way. And so I did. I had a lot of growing up to do, and and I did. And I'm not saying that I haven't learned everything, because I sure as hell didn't. But I'm always still learning. I'm always trying to learn from others, and even with Matt. I mean, the like some of the technology base that he does now. I I'm not as technical as he is with the audio or the Photoshop or any of that, but I told him I'm willing to learn. I'm kind of like my dad. Okay, I'm like the social butterfly. I like to be like, hey, how you doing, man? Let's talk. Let's get this going. So I kind of like the promoting aspect, right? Because I'll talk your ear off. Like, I'll talk about anything you want me to do, and then a lot of times people are like, hey, I gotta go, man. I'm like, no, I'm not done talking. Let's let's keep going. And I know Matt sometimes he'll be like, hey, can you stop talking to me? And he doesn't want to tell me this, but he's like, can you just like leave me alone for like the like 2 weeks from like yesterday? Like, that'd be great. And I'm like, man, but I want to talk to you. And he's like, but I don't want to talk to you. So no, but I would say as a whole, I think with me and Matt, it's taken a long time, but it it made us realize that you know we wanted to really do this podcast because we had an idea a long time ago. I was actually in Farnham, and we had this idea of like wanting to do a podcast. We talked about it. We never really, you know, said, "Hey, let's do it."
Yeah.
But we had it, and then we never talked about it. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes up to me, okay, and he's like, "Hey, man, I had this idea. Want to do that podcast we were talking about for the last like 5, 6 years?" And I'm like, "Okay, what is it about?" He's like, "Well, here's the idea." It's like he shows me all the names. He goes over like what we'd be talking about, all this other stuff. And it's like he's like, "Yeah, Geeks from the Multiverse." And I'm like I said, it was just a name that I didn't know. And then I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Like, let's get this started. Like, let's
Yeah.
let's start doing this. And I think more like our roles is like, I'm I'd say like more promoter, like want to like talk to people about it, like kind of get ideas, kind of talk with the people. Matt's more behind the scenes. Like, I think that's really what he likes to do. He likes to do the editing. He likes to do some of that other stuff.
Our roles work for our personalities. So, I know within my realm what I need to get done. And if I can't get it done, yes, then that's when I'll be like, hey, I need you to work on some of this because I can't get it all done. But I'm not in that realm right now because we're not doing a whole lot of that kind of stuff.
Oh, no, right. And I mean, there's
So,
going to be stuff down the road. We're going to have to figure that out later. But I will say this, Matt. I think we did a pretty good job on, describing who we were and kind of getting the overall, like, of what this podcast is about,
yeah.
you know. But anyways, guys, so we're going to end off with saying this, right? We are, we're here. We're here to stay. We're not going to try to, deviate from our past, right? So we're still doing our social media stuff on Instagram, on Facebook, and now on TikTok.
Now on TikTok.
Right. And we're going to be hopefully trying to go in other avenues, because one interesting fact is, a lot of people probably don't even know this, but therapists are now going on TikTok and talking about like different education values and different things about that. Now, I think it's interesting only because it's very sensitive in the way they're talking about it, but it's another avenue for them to be able to talk about with people who are trying to seek answers. So the only reason why I bring this up is because we're not professionals in that realm in some aspects, right? Because I mean, granted, I'm going to school to become um, a social worker, in a sense. So basically, kind of the same avenue as what Matt has done, but in the more addiction side. But I want us to talk about, like I said, those specific issues that we've had in the past. So the biggest thing is having you guys talk to us, like having you guys letting us know how we're doing, like letting us know maybe different topics about different things that we may not have thought about before, and these are things that we don't always think about. So keep in mind that we're here. We want your opinions. We want your feedback. We want all this stuff, and again, our link tree, it's on our Facebook as well as our Instagram. And even if you go on our website, I mean, you can pretty much find us even on there as well with all the media outlets that we have. So, yeah. Is there anything else, Matt?
That's it.
All right. As always,
Stay geeky.